Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Zero Lab podcast. I am your co-host, Max Johnson, here with my friends Tom and Austin. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good today, Max. How are you?
I'm doing great. So this week, we're going to talk about Milwaukee regional results, which all three of us did attend. We'll talk about what the meta adjustments might look like going into Fresno. We'll talk about just a recap of the Scarlet Violet format as a whole, now that we're going to be moving into Paldea Evolved, which comes out on June 9th. And then we will be talking about our stellar wishes.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good to
Let's
me.
get into it.
All right, so how did Milwaukee go for you guys?
Big thumbs down from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. Anyone want to tell their story first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So,
I just want to. Can I just kind of give a trigger warning?
Please
Austin's
do.
really salty.
I'm very salty.
I think we're about to get a real rant here. So
Yeah,
I'm
you're
excited.
gonna get a rant.
We're gonna get a good YouTube short out of this.
Yeah, you're gonna get a rant here for sure. So, let's kick things off by saying, out of the 9 games I played in day 1, I lost all 9 of my coin flips. That is correct. You heard me right. I lost all 9 of my coin flips. I went second in every single game 1.
Did you flip the coins or did your opponents?
It was 50-50. I flipped it, I think, 3 or 4 times, and my opponent flipped it the rest of the times. I called tails every single time. So, I don't remember what my opponents called every time, but whatever they called, they got it right. So it was very frustrating.
Yeah.
And I also played 5 mirrors. Now,
What did you play?
Right, I was just going to say, you might be thinking, well, what were you playing? 5 mirrors? That sounds like maybe you were playing Lugia, or perhaps, some variant of Lost Box. And that's where you're wrong. I was playing Gardevoir EX. I hit 5 mirrors playing Gardevoir EX. You can look at the day 1 stats and you can see that it was, I think it was like a 12% meta share.
Is it higher than that?
I think it was about that.
Yeah, you can do the math on that, and you can see for yourself just how absurdly unlikely both of those 2 things are just in and of themselves. The fact that I lost every coin flip and hit 5 mirrors, I'm not happy about that. Now, to be fair, in the mirror, I did go 3-1-1. So I did very well into the mirrors. But, it was a pretty frustrating day. I played Gardevoir with the Espeon VMAX, which, as these guys can attest to, was a very good deck.
It just beat Kyogre. It just beats Kyogre. We played it over and over because that was the whole point. We thought Kyogre was going to be a massive part of this weekend.
Which it was.
It was, yep.
And so we were helping Austin test in that matchup and make it better for Guardy, and he basically solved it with the Espeon and the list he was playing that made it basically a 90-10 matchup into Kyogre.
Yes. The only way you lose is if you completely brick 3 turns in a row, or if you prize the VMAX and don't see it before your 3rd prize, basically, is how you lose in that matchup. And you also may be thinking, well, how many Lost Box were you able to play? I got to play 1, and I prized my Espeon VMAX, my Manaphy, and my Hisuian Heavy Ball. I just want you to think about that for a moment. The one matchup I needed those cards in, I prized all of them in my game 1. And I was also kind of stupid because you know what I should have done, realizing that? I should have just said, all right, let's go to game 2. I didn't do that. I didn't do that because I still had a really good setup. And so in my mind, I was thinking to myself, well, I still have a pretty good shot here. It's not unwinnable.
Without the VMAX, it's not unwinnable. Without Manaphy,
Manaphy is really tough.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty triggered, and I think I was playing not my best, and I wasn't using logic very well in that second game because of just how frustrated I was at the fact that I prized literally the cards I needed in that matchup, which was just so frustrating. It was very triggering. I was very upset. So I should have just scooped, and I didn't, and ended up taking a loss that round because we, of course, couldn't finish our game 2 even after I did ultimately scoop. So that was really annoying. I think, honestly, the deck played amazingly. I bricked, I think, twice out of those 9 rounds. And so the deck played super, super well. I would have only changed probably 1 card. I would have cut, I think, a Professor's Research for a Choice Belt, which is something that Henry Henry Brand ended up doing, as well as I'm blanking on Jake Gearhart also did that, and there's a player, Stefan also did that. And I think that was a really smart choice, especially if you're expecting to see any amount of Arc Umbreon that allows you to unlock an additional win condition against that deck by just gusting up a Umbreon V before it evolves. You can do that on your turn 2 or turn 3, and that makes things very challenging for the Arceus player, because they don't always bench both Umbreon Vs. Sometimes they will opt to only go with one, and if they do that...
Or they can only go with one.
Right? They only play the 2/2 lines, so if either one of those other pieces is prized, they may just opt to play the one down, and ends up being a very interesting, actually swings the matchup back into your favor if you're able to do that. So that would have been the one change I would have made. It was really frustrating to lose all of my coin flips. I absolutely easily think that I would have made day 2 had I not lost every single one of my coin flips. My deck was running so hot. The fact that I even managed to go 4-4-1, going second every single game, I think speaks a lot to the deck. So I don't feel bad about my deck choice, but definitely got hit with some really, I want to use a different word, but unfortunate variance throughout the weekend. So it was pretty frustrating, and I wish things would have been differently. Again, the deck played super well. I only misplayed once. So
yeah,
it's just one of those weekends, unfortunately, where
I think bad
things
variance
didn't go well.
was just kind of the story of Milwaukee for a lot of us. We were all pretty well prepared for Milwaukee, I think. We all kind of had our deck lists. There's always that sort of flip-flopping the night before of, should I play something else? But we all pretty much stuck to what we had been testing.
Yeah.
And the variants just didn't go our way. So I played Mew VMAX. I played the DTE Mew. I was pretty confident in the Kyogre matchup, being able to win that matchup. That was the one that I was worried about, but I kind of just said, if I face the Sky Seal Drapion Lost Box, that's probably just a loss. There's just not much you can do against that. It's easy for them to, over the course of 4 or 5 turns, take out one Genesect and then take the KO with the Sky Seal Drapion.
Oh, and you were playing a pretty kind of spicy version of DT Mew.
Yeah, I guess technically the only spicy card I would say I had in there was the Misfortune Sisters. I think if I had to do it over again, I would make that an Avery. But the Misfortune Sisters was kind of a counter to Kyogre, because you could theoretically discard their Mirage Gates and their energy recyclers and things like that off the Misfortune Sisters. So it was kind of like a fun card to put in there. And I couldn't really think of anything better for the weekend to take that slot. There's just nothing. We thought about like a 4th Judge or a couple other things, and just wasn't worth it.
Well, and you played the one more card that was a little different too.
I played the One Lost City. Or wait, what did I
play? The Squirrel.
And you played Squirrel.
I did play the Squirrel. I played the Squirrel. Sorry, the Squirrel is so natural in that deck to me now. I forget that everyone doesn't play it. Yeah. If you're not playing the Squirrel, you're messing up. So I played
really good.
The Squilvet, the Nest Stash, which has a different ability name in Japan. I won't say what it is.
We're not going to say.
But
it's a very funny name. It's a very nice name.
It's something about a nut.
Yeah, something with a nut.
Anyway, so the Squirrel is just busted, and it just makes those clogged hands feel so much better playing with the Squilvet. So what the Squilvet does is you shuffle your hand, you put it on the bottom of your deck, and draw 1 card. I use that thing, I think, in every single game, and it was amazing. Like, you get a handful of supporters, and you've already played your supporter for turn. You just get rid of it, and you draw, more cards. You get a handful of power tablets that you don't want to burn, that you're going to need later for the game. You Squilvet them to the bottom of the deck, and you draw brand new cards. It's just a great card. On top of that, it's a 1-prizer. It's kind of a little bit of a bait for Lost Box. Good Lost Box players aren't going to KO it and go to 3 prizes, specifically for the Kyogre deck. They're not going to want to KO the Squilvet and go to 3 prizes, because then you can Roxanne them. But some less skilled Lost Box players might be baited by that. Or you might get into a situation where they don't want to KO the Squirrel Vet. Let's say it's turn 1 or turn 2 and they rope and they're going to go into a cram play. You can send up the Squirrel Vet into the active and then they have to make the decision, okay, am I going to take the knockout or just not attack this turn? Because you really don't want to get on that Roxanne turn as the Kyogre deck. So I played the Squirrel, and then it was a card that some Mews are playing, some DTE Mews are playing, some are not, but I played a Lost City. A lot of DTE Mews were just playing 4 Path. I decided to go 1 Lost City, 3 Path. Part of that was if you encounter a Rogue Drapion, it's nice to be able to Lost City it and put it into Lost Zone so it can't be recovered. But it was actually more for the Kyogre deck. I kind of found out over the course of our testing, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but if you Lost City their Greninja turn 2, they're never getting to the Kyogre, almost guaranteed. Like, they just don't have enough dig after that to get to the Kyogre. Between all the judges you're going to hit him with as well. So I thought that was a really good play for the tournament. It was just nice to have an extra path out in case you hit any mirrors or any Arceus decks that are playing paths, like Arceus Giratina. It was kind of like that extra path out. I played 4 vacuums, 2 Force Seal Stones. So that's 6 path outs, but then to have kind of a 7th in the Lost City was cool too. So you could also have like a stadium bump of your own stadium. Yeah, but I just hit bad variants. Started the day with a Darkrai. Actually beat the Darkrai because they didn't play Drapion. It's funny that Darkrai has to play Drapion and still beat Mew, but
Feels bad.
then I hit Fusion Mew, to which I lost because I saw 0 Battle VIP pass that whole set, and my opponent saw 2 every game. And then I played against my first Lost Box in round 3, and they were playing the Sky Seal Drapion, and I just barely eked out a tie against that, which is about the best you can hope for in that situation. So started the day 1-1-1, ended the day 4-4-1 in round 6. After round 5, I was at 2-2-1, so I knew I had to win out. And by round 8, I was 4-2-1, so I was like, I just need to win 2 more. I came up against a Lugia. They won game 1. I won game 2. Game 3, I'm going second. I judge path them turn 1. They have no Archeops in the discard, and they go Capturing Aroma heads for an Archeops. Ultra Ball away the Archeops and another card for another Archeops. Play Professor's Research. This is all off a judge. Play Professor's Research to discard the second Archeops, get a hand of 7, play down Pumpkaboo, evolve Lugia into the V-Star, and that's basically the game from there. The whole thing with Mew versus Lugia is you still have to lock them out of that V-Star power turn 2 to win, most likely. And if you can't do that, you're probably going to lose because the Tyranitar just hits weakness, and they can throw the V-Guard on it, which makes it a little bit harder for you to KO. You have to have Choice Belt and 2 Power Tablets to KO a V-Guarded Tyranitar. So that kind of knocked me out of day 2 contention, and I said, that's all right, I can still get top 256, and then I played against another Sky Seal Drapion in round 9. So that was how I ended up 4-4-1 at Milwaukee. But that's just the game sometimes. That's variance. Sometimes you have those days where your opponents hit the nuts off of every judge, and sometimes you hit the nuts off of every judge.
Right.
But,
Should
disappointing.
Yeah, super disappointing.
Yeah.
Also, should I elaborate on any of my rounds more so?
Let's let Max go.
Max go. Yeah.
Well, I just played Reagan Redsloff 60. I was on Kyogre Lost Box for a while, up until I think the week before Milwaukee, and I felt like Lost Box had a really good matchup into Gardy, but I felt like more people might be trying the Espeon, and I was like, I don't know. In my head, I'm like, I'm okay with the Kyogre Lost Box deck, but I felt like I could make day 2 with it. But I felt like if I made day 2 with it, I was probably I don't know if I could beat the more experienced players in the mirror with it. Yeah. So I was just like, I'm gonna play Lugia. It's a good deck. Just can win anything really.
Yeah.
And I started the day 3-1 with my only loss in round 1 being to a Lugia mirror where I went second. We're playing the exact same 60. I just went second, and I was just never able to catch up in game 1, and then won game 2, and then went second in game 3 and lost. I think it was nice that the Lugia mirrors are so quick. That was a nice part for sure. And then I won the next 3 pretty quick. Beat like 2 Guardies and a Lost Box. So I was 3-1 going into lunch break. So I was feeling pretty good. And then my next 3 games were all Lugia mirrors again, where I went second in every single one of them. And so I went so against Lugia mirrors for the day, I was 0-3-1 into them, and I won every other match that I played. So it's kind of tough. Like the Lugia was not on my side this weekend for sure. I felt like, all my losses. I don't really feel like I made any big misplays, except in one round I played against Christian Moreno, who was, I think he top 16 or 32 to previous regional. He was a good player for sure. We were playing the 60 card mirror, and boy, I should have won that game, and he played to his outs, and he got me. He stuck me. He boss stuck me, and that felt pretty bad. Yeah. So that was kind of unfortunate, and I kind of misplayed that. So I finished the day 5-3-1. So I was top 256, but I wish I could have eked out that one more game and made it to day 2.
Yeah.
Right.
So tough weekend overall, but if we look at the results from Milwaukee, our top 8. I had it pulled up. There we go. Our top 8 was Henry Brand, pulled it out with Gardevoir. Then we had 3 of the people on the same team playing the Lost Box Kyogre. That's Caleb Gettimer, Azul, and Grant Manley. They were all in top 8 with Kyogre. Then there was an Arceus Giratina, another Gardevoir, and 2 Mews. So, no Lugia in top 8 is kind of the first thing to say. Secondly, that's Gardy's first regional win in the U.S., I believe. Yeah. And kind of my takeaway from this, there was a lot of Lugia in top 16. There was 3 Lugia in top 16, so they were all kind of up there close.
And something to mention, too, is that in the day 2 meta share, there was almost 25% of Lugia in the day 2. So there was a lot of Lugia in day 2. So it is, I think, extra surprising, I think, to me, that we didn't end up seeing at least one Lugia break into top 8. But also, sometimes that is just kind of how things happen, I suppose. But.
Well, I think the thing I wanted to note about that is our instincts were really good going into Milwaukee. So between the 3 of us, the 4 decks we were entertaining were Gardy, Lugia, Mew, and Kyogre. And they were all of the top 8 and a large portion of the top 16. Mm-hmm. There was 2 more Mews in top 16. There were 3 Lugias. There was another Kyogre. So our instincts going into the weekend were good. It just didn't fully pan out for us in the variance department. But you can't always control that. But I think it is like it's a good feeling knowing that the deck you picked for the tournament was pretty much like the right call. Yeah. Depending on your play style. Like I was never going to play Lugia probably. I can't play that deck. But like I would have considered Guardy, Lost Box, or Mew, right? And you probably never would have considered Lost Box, but you might have considered the others.
Yeah.
No, you would have never considered Mew.
No, I'm never playing Mew ever. But
if I told you you're guaranteed to top 16,
I wouldn't play it.
And
I'm serious about that. I know some people are probably thinking, "Oh, that you're just saying that." No, I would never play Mew. I'm not playing Mew. It's never touching my hands.
So
I think I played 5 games.
I just think you're a bigot.
I am a little bit about Mew. I hate Mew. I'm a massive Mew hater.
But I think okay. So here's an interesting thing to say though. So one of the things we said going into the weekend was you played Espeon in Guardy because of the Kyogre matchup.
Right.
So Henry Brand, obviously a world champion,
very
good player, plays Guardy, wins the whole thing. Over the course of the weekend, he played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Lost Box decks, and he only lost to 1. And that was Andrew Hedrick, who's also like an insanely good Lost Box player.
Yeah.
I think
that was his round. Was that round 1 of day 2?
Round 1 of day 2.
Yeah.
And so he beat his only loss. His only other loss was to Miraidon Flaffy. So I'd be curious to see that match in round 2.
Yeah. That.
But I mean,
there's
a
lot surprising about
Yeah.
all of that, I think, in my opinion.
But if you watch Henry play against Caleb in the finals, like that was a masterclass in playing Guardy against Lost Box.
Yeah.
I think it also proves that you don't need this. I think Henry proved that a good Guardy player can beat Lost Box.
Yeah.
Even against the best Lost Box players like
Yeah.
Grant, Azul, Caleb. Those are like the top 3 names you associate with Kyogre at this point. And so that, I think, leads into an interesting discussion in Fresno, because Fresno is this coming weekend, and it's still in the same format. And we've seen kind of a dip of Guardy. Guardy kind of spiked in Portland. It was like the highest meta share, I think, in Portland, or maybe it was like 0.1% behind Lost Box. It was something
No, I think
crazy.
it was the top one.
Yeah, it was like 21% of Portland. And it's just fallen from there because people were kind of like, the Lost Box matchup is so bad, I just don't want to play it. But I think that Guardy has like really good matchups into nearly everything else. Like, yeah, you have to worry about the dark weakness into Lugia, but you can kind of trade one prizers into that matchup.
You can play around that, yeah.
Yeah, and do pretty well there. You have the Temple of Sinnoh and a lot of Guardy lists that, maybe at the end of the game, like you can attack with the Guardy EX and Temple Roxanne them so that they're not able to take like the final KO with the single prize Yveltal or something. So Guardy has a lot of good matchups. It's a fun deck to play. Guardy's a popular Pokemon. It's one of those things where you would expect it to be played a little bit higher than it has been recently. And I think we could see that meta share go back up after this regional win going into Fresno.
I totally agree. I do think for sure Guardy will go up from Milwaukee to Fresno.
Certainly. I think the thing that to me I'd be curious about is, as someone I've played Guardy the entire format, and the thing I'd be curious to see is what exactly some of those games that Henry played against some of those Lost Box players looked like, because as we saw in the finals, right, an example here was, Caleb in game 1 pretty much bricked, right? And so when you go down a game to Guardy like that, and you're also not able to, then in the follow-up game, right, he wasn't quite able to push into like a Greninja play. He wasn't quite able to push into some of those more powerful plays. And I think my guess is what happened is, as Henry was playing against those other Lost Box players, that's probably what happened. My guess is that they weren't probably able to push into some of those plays because...
maybe, but like to beat 5 or 6 of them, to assume they all bricked at some point. And
well, I'm not necessarily saying that they bricked, but what I'm saying is I don't think they high rolled.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're right there have been so many times when I'm playing against Lost Box where the turn 2 Sableye play comes off, or the turn even the turn 1 Greninja play comes down is not as uncommon as people think it is.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take away from Henry's win here by any means. I don't want to do that. But I do want to point out that is very likely what happened.
Yeah.
That would be I would love to, if we get some more information that
it could
make
be.
that not be the case, I'd be super interested to hear that.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I just think that
well.
there's ways that Guardy just beats Lost Box. Like,
Penny
Penny plays on
sure.
Zacian, getting damage off the board, collapse stadiums, using that Moonglow reverse over and over. There's just a lot of ways that the deck can beat Lost Box.
Right.
If piloted correctly. And yes, does Guardy probably just lose any time that they get the turn 1 Greninja play off or the turn 2, say, like, probably. But, like, I also don't think that those are that common. Like they can happen for Lost Box.
Sure.
But they're not happening every game that Lost Box plays. That's Lost Box's high roll. And
sure.
Any normal Lost Box game, like turn 2, turn 1 going second, Lost Box is going to take a KO with Cram. Like, Lost Box is going to be up unless you have the Zacian active. And then you can penny that and remove the effectiveness of Lost Box previous turn. Like, there's a ton of plays that Guardy can make, I think, into Lost Box without just saying I only win if they don't high roll.
Yeah. No, I there's definitely ways to play, and again, like you said, I think the way that Henry played, especially in particular that game 2 of the finals there, I agree with you. That was basically a masterclass. Even with him opting to take a judge right off of the Luminion when he did, that was really, I think, very smart and was very clearly the right play. Of course, we were able to see Caleb's hand even in that circumstance where he was not able to get out of that judge play there. He had to make some really difficult decisions, was not able to execute a Sableye play like he wanted to that turn, right? If I'm remembering correctly, I think he had to cram then that turn, which was definitely not optimal. But so there's definitely outs for sure. I do think it is just I still think it's a very challenging matchup.
Yeah.
And I think that there is definitely an element of when you're playing Gardy without any specific counterattacks, I do think that there is still you just kind of have to get lucky in some sense of it. Again, I don't want to take away from Henry's win there in any way, right? He played excellently, but also I think it is significantly more challenging than it maybe appears based off of this weekend.
Yeah. But I think, so looking forward into Fresno, I think like the only changes I really expect is for Gardy to go up a little bit.
Yeah.
Mew's still going to be popular. Lugia is still a good play. Kyogre's still a good play. All of these decks that we've been seeing. One of the things that didn't really show up this weekend was the Arceus Duraludon Umbreon deck. I didn't see a lot of that personally. We didn't really see any of it in the top 8 or top 16. But one thing to mention is there was a new Arceus variant that came out that was pretty cool, which is the Arceus Aerodactyl Klefki deck, which basically its whole plan is to lock everyone else out of the game as much as possible. The Klefkis ideally take care of things like Mew and Lost Box. The Aerodactyl, if you're able to go first, can take care of Lugia and make sure that they never get their V-Star power off. And then the Aerodactyl as well can hit weakness into other Arceus decks. It can one-shot the Dragonite against Lost Box. Things like that. So that was, I think, a really cool deck to come out of the weekend. I would not be surprised to see a little bit more of people just kind of copying that 60 and going with it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we'll see a lot more of that deck in Fresno for sure. I don't know if I'll go far. I don't think it'll be like the most popular Arceus.
I don't think we're going to see Arceus keys on like the day one meta share. Yeah.
But a lot more people will play it now that it's a known.
There was only there was like one team that brought it, right? But now there's going to be.
Yeah, and they did pretty decent across the board.
They all made day 2, I think, first of all.
Yeah, I think the Christian Fontenot had like the highest placement, and then like a couple of players.
17th, he just bubbled.
Yeah,
top 16. Yeah.
Another interesting that also played the Aerodactyl was, if you look at the 11th place deck list, it was a Arctina that also opted for a 1/1 Aerodactyl as well. I ended up actually playing Locke in day 1, and I was very surprised to see not only that he was playing the Aerodactyl, but he was playing so many capturing aromas. I could hardly even believe it. I think in our game 1, I think he used like 3 of them, and my jaw was kind of on the floor. I just had never seen anything quite like that before. And the Collapse Stadium. He dropped the Collapse Stadium on me, and I was pretty surprised as well. So really interesting list as well, if you haven't taken a look at that as well. 2 really interesting options to consider, I think, for Fresno. Aerodactyl definitely showing up.
Yeah. And we still are seeing a little bit of success. Like Miraidon just kind of holds on by a thread. Every tournament you get like one Miraidon player who does pretty well. So we had a 14th place Miraidon list that got into the top 16. It played the Flaffy. It played the Magnezone, and Austin famously said in last week's episode that if you're not playing the Magnezone, what are you doing?
What are you doing? I don't know what you're doing. You got to play the Magnezone. That's a good card.
So yeah, Miraidon kind of still hanging on, and then other than that, that was kind of the Milwaukee weekend and kind of our thoughts going into Fresno. Personally, I'm kind of done with this format because Paldea Evolved comes out on Friday, so I've just been focusing on Paldea Evolved and getting ready for NAIC. That's my last chance at a Worlds invite. I'm pretty far away because the start of the season was horrendous for me, and then Milwaukee was horrendous for me, so it all kind of hangs on by a thread. Probably need a top 16 at NAIC, so
I think a lot of people are in the same boat, trying to. This is the last chance tournament to get their Worlds invites.
So I'm going to be testing pretty hard for NAIC, and I'm going to be pretty upset if it goes the way Milwaukee went.
Yeah.
But we're not going to let that happen. So.
Well, yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up about this season too is how many top 8s has Grant Manley had. That is actually he's collecting
that's just
those
kind of
things
his brand,
like Infinity Stones. It's actually insane.
It is pretty crazy. He's got to break through one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that would. I mean, you can't really be mad about a top 8. Like,
top 8's an amazing.
Like how many
placement.
people are oh man, I want to get my first top 8, but to get it so often, then never have the regional win. That's rough. That's heartbreaking. Honestly.
Yeah, it's tough.
That would be so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, you'll get there eventually, Grant.
Yeah,
you will. I'm sure you will. You have to. If you don't,
it's like the Cubs.
All the rest of us. Yeah,
it'll be like 50 years, but he'll finally get the regional.
I'm a diehard Cubs fan, so I get it. You got to just keep trying. You got to keep pushing. Eventually, it'll happen. It will.
Yeah.
I think I have never seen a player get so unlucky in their top 8s ever. Like in Portland. Oh my God.
Yeah. Or in Fort Wayne when he had to come up against you, he finally decided to get off the lost box and play Reggie's, and then in top 8 he gets
great
Gudra.
matchups across the board, and then except for the one worst matchup he could possibly hit.
Yeah,
Gudra.
Like so unlucky.
Yeah, it's so bad. Gudra's the reason I went 4-4-1 in Salt Lake. Hit the Art Gudra, not even the lost Gudra. The Art Gudra. It's very scary.
Well, yeah, I think I'm pretty happy. I'm personally pretty happy that this format is over. I honestly, now that this format's done, I can confidently say I preferred the previous format. Yeah.
Get out!
I'm
you
serious.
liked Silver Tempest?
I didn't think I liked it.
That's because you won a regional in Silver Tempest.
Oh,
Of course, you gotta like Silver Tempest.
I
don't know.
I prefer formats where I can play Gudra, and this is not a format where I can play Gudra.
Yeah, definitely.
I hate to say it, but I'm not sure you're ever playing Gudra in the next format either.
It's does not too many one shot decks.
Yeah.
It's tricky. It's tricky. This format has been interesting. I think. I definitely have not been a fan of the amount of just how powerful Lost Box has been. I think I was hoping that potentially this current format was going to tone Lost Box down a little bit, and I think what ended up happening is the power level of everything else around it came down so heavily that Lost Box just shot to the top. Unless you guys disagree with me, I think it's pretty safe to say Lost Box Kyogre, I think, deserves BDIF status. I think we've talked about that a little bit over the last couple of weeks. We have not had a single regional where it hasn't occupied at least 2 or 3 of the top 8 spots, which to me is just a very clear indicator that it is just absolutely an amazing deck.
Yeah.
So
I don't really have a problem with it. I think it was nice to see kind of a one prize deck a little bit in the spotlight. It is mostly a one prize deck. It can
mostly,
play the Vs. And I do think, like, thinking back on Silver Tempest a little bit, I know that Sableye being a thing gatekeeps a lot of decks, so maybe Silver Tempest would have looked a little bit different. But I think without Lost Box, the domination of Lugia in the Silver Tempest format would have been way too much.
It would have been disgusting.
It would have been way too much.
Yeah.
So thank God for Lost Box.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think it's a fun deck to play. I do enjoy Lost Box. I know that it's frustrating because Sableye does gatekeep a lot of things, and just the speed of the deck is pretty crazy. But I think it's at least an enjoyable deck to play that takes a lot of skill to do well with. I think one of the things that you see sometimes, like the Lost Box mirror, like really often is dictated by skill. If everyone's finding their Colress, it's purely dictated by skill, I think, in the end. And that's good to see for a top tier deck. And beyond that, I think that seeing Lost Box be only 20% of a meta, only 20%. But like compared to Lugia being 30-35, I think 20% of a deck that is widely considered the BDIF that's very cheap, so like anyone can play that deck. So it's very accessible. It's been out for a while, so people can have had a lot of time to practice with it. Seeing that sort of deck that is clearly the BDIF be only 20% of the meta, I think is fair.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think I'm also probably willing to admit this, that I think I'm maybe a little on the saltier side of it, because there were, of course, 2 single prize decks last format that were really strong decks. And one of them One of those two took really heavy collateral damage, of course, in Reggies. And I think if Reggies were able to exist in this current format, I think I would feel less sad about, I'd feel a little less upset about Lost Box being as good as it is, because Reggies naturally had a very positive,
more
trade.
Lost Box.
Yeah, very positive trade into Lost Box. Even if they did play the Kyogre, it was still a pretty positive matchup overall. Certainly, that was not a deck where Sableye completely gatekept it.
Yeah.
Which I want to be able to see more of that.
Yeah.
And
I think we will. I think that we're seeing we're like in a transitionary period. We're in a new format.
Yep.
None of the cards, well, not none of the cards, but I think there's a very obvious power level differential from the cards they're printing now to the cards they were printing in the V-Star format.
Yeah.
And I think I just like every time they release a new set, like I'm excited about the card design. So right now I think we're seeing a couple cool things. We're seeing the Spiritomb come in, which can be a counter to Lumineons and primarily Mew as a one prizer. So they're starting to try to like make these cards that they're gonna get the V's out of the way so that EXs can start to shine. And the more I think that EXs start to shine, the better that the format gets. We see Iono come into the format here soon, which I think that Lost Box will struggle with, although a deck like Kyogre can still play that 4-prize game to avoid really bad Ionos. But still, more disruption in a format is not something Lost Box really wants to see. We see Gardy get better. The reversal energy is just so good for that deck. We see, I don't know, we have the Ting Lu. It remains to be seen what Ting Lu will do, but that seems like a deck that can really, really feast on Lost Box.
Yeah.
Even like in a better way than like the Rapid Strike box ever could.
Yeah, definitely.
The Rapid Strike box could not beat Lugia, but Ting Lu can shut off the Archeops. And I don't really know what Lugia is going to do from there. And if they get a damage counter on your Lugia before it turns into a V-Star, like your Lugia can't even use its V-Star power against Ting Lu. So
yeah, and Lugia also has to deal with the new Luxray.
The new Luxray is
Big counter
such
to
a
it.
cool card. I mean, the comeback mechanics we're seeing, I think we're going in a great direction. And I cannot wait for NAIC. I can't wait for, to watch Worlds or, please God, be there. But at least watch Max win the whole thing. And have him send me back a bunch of Pokemon Center merch.
that'd be awesome. We have high hopes.
Yeah, high hopes.
Max.
We're big expectations there. Maybe Sam could go shopping for us while you're playing.
Oh, we're bringing in a whole empty checked luggage to just bring back stuff from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's the right call.
That's the right call. Yeah. Anyway, so I think good things are on the horizon. I think we'll get more into the Paldea Evolved discussion next week. Kind of talk about our expectations for NAIC. I know we're planning on doing a ton of testing this week, so I think we'll have some more coherent thoughts about the format next week when we talk about it. But yeah, anything else to say before we hop into our next segment?
Yeah, just one last thing. Like, are there off the top of your head? Do you think there's any big or maybe just noticeable changes that some of the top decks might look to change for Fresno? Is there any cards that you think do you think the Choice Belt will be a more popular, including Gardy, now that it was in the winning list?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be the main change to Gardy, or maybe the Espeon. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, with Stefan getting top 16 with the Espeon, I think there's going to, over this next week, there will be people who either haven't thought about it or maybe were a little too scared to try really grinding it because they just felt like, well, if top players thought it was going to be good, then surely it would be in some deck lists already. I think there'll be some more experimentation with that. I think it's really good. I stand by the Espeon. I think it's a great card. I think the Choice Belt is definitely a card that Gardy is going to want to probably put into the list, one that I was testing a little bit, and ultimately I didn't pull the trigger on it.
Yeah.
It especially makes the Arc Umbreon matchup a little bit easier because you can utilize a Candied Gardy EX that immediately comes into play, gust up a benched Umbreon V, and be able to knock it out before it gets a chance even to evolve. That's a very, very strong play, and being able to get that off while having a lot of peace, knowing you're never getting one shot in return there, feels really good.
Yeah.
That's very strong. There's lots of other applications for it, but that's just one example.
Yeah.
I
don't think we see Mew lists change too
No.
much. I don't think we see Lugia lists change too much.
Yep.
I don't think we see Lost Box change too much, although
No.
if there's more Guardy expected, one of the Lost Box lists that has sort of fallen out of popularity is the Lost Box Moltres Kyogre deck. So if people are feeling kind of froggy at the end of the format and they want to play kind of more of a single prize focused Kyogre deck instead of playing like the Dragonite and the Raikou, we could see some people bring
Sure.
that back a little bit. But those are really the only changes I see.
Cool.
I think the only deck probably that's more or less brand new that we talked about, mentioned here, is that Arc Aerodactyl. I think
Yeah.
that's going to probably see significantly more play this upcoming weekend in Fresno than we did see in Milwaukee. By how much, I'm not sure, but I would not be surprised at all to see at least 3 or 4 of those end up making day 2 and probably placing pretty well, I would imagine, in day 2 as well.
Yeah, you don't want to see that as Lost Box. You don't really want to see that as Mew.
No.
Shutting off the Mew and the Greninja turn 1 against Guardy really slows them down, I think.
Yeah, you don't want to see it as Lugia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it does shut off your Lumineon, so that's tough. And
Right.
the Aerodactyl.
Mhm.
But as long as you go first, you're probably hopefully still okay
Yeah.
as Lugia. But
Right.
they do play the Judge path. But in my experience, Lugia just always has it.
They just always have that risk.
Man.
So anyway, that's our thoughts on the current stuff, Fresno, and we'll move on to NISC next week. But moving on here then to our Stellar Wish segment. Do you want to start us off, Max?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a card that I've been messing around with for Paldea Evolved format, specifically in Ting-Lu, and it's the Mystery Charge Claydol from Silver Tempest, which I think is a really cool card that has a powerful effect, but has a very significant drawback. So
what is the ability?
So Mystery Charge lets you, once per turn, if you don't have any supporter cards in your discard, you can accelerate a fighting energy from your deck to one of your fighting Pokemon. So, that's seems like a pretty, when you play Ting-Lu, you have to figure out how to power it up.
Yep.
If you whiff the turn 1 Koraidon,
Yep.
2 energies, that feels pretty bad. So, I was thinking maybe there's a world where you play a lot of drawing item cards,
Yep.
and you play it with the Claydol.
Yeah.
And so that way, as long as you get a Claydol down, you're still attacking.
So instead of playing supporters in the deck, you're playing trekking shoes and the pickaxe
and switching cups.
switching cups,
And-
Cramomatics.
Cramomatics, you
That'll
play
be a key
Pokestop.
pass. Pokestop, yeah.
Yeah, so
That
I thought it's
sounds
cool.
cool.
And I again, it's accelerating energy is always a powerful effect.
Mhm.
It's just the question is is the Ting-Lu ability locks good enough to win you those games against Lost Box, because you'll never be disrupting their hand.
Yeah.
So I think maybe it's too early to throw it on the Stellar Wish list, but I don't think it's going to see too much play.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool card though.
Nice. How about you, Austin?
I've got a card that I really like a lot. I want it to be good, but I'm just predicting now it's not going to be good. Meowscarada EX. I really want that card to be good. I like the design of that card a lot. I love that it is a DCE attacker, stage 2 attacker. I love that it has big hit points. The 310 HP is fantastic. It has an amazing ability, right? You get to discard a grass energy, throw 3 damage counters onto one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. And of course, its attack, I think, is really powerful too. For that, it does 100 damage, and then if I remember correctly, it does an additional 120 damage if your opponent's Pokemon has any damage counters on them. But unfortunately, I think that at best it'll be probably a low tier 2 deck if someone's able to crack it. I want that to be better. I think it should have potentially been able to be better. I am not saying that it's going to be bad forever, but I don't think that it is going to be very impactful as a deck in and of itself in the Paldea Evolved format, as much as I would love it to be, because I like the idea of the deck quite a bit. But
I think I'm not quite ready to write it off yet, and that's only because right now we still have all the E and F block cards, and once those are gone, I could definitely see that being like a much better deck.
For
Yeah,
sure. And
for sure.
I completely
There's
agree.
a long future ahead of it.
Yeah,
but-
long-
I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
I think there's definitely a long future ahead for that card. I guess maybe this is against the rules of Stellar Wish, but
No, it's
mainly
not.
mainly I'm thinking of
There are no rules.
There's
No
no rules. Mainly I'm thinking about like the immediate next format.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be very good, but I want it to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it deserves to be good. On paper, it is very good. It's very powerful on paper, but also, as many of us will remember, a lot of us thought during the Astral Radiance format that, of course, the Hisuian Samurott we thought
Yeah.
was also going to be very good because it just seemed like it would be very good
Yeah.
on paper and ended up not being particularly good. So I'm a little worried that it's going to see some similar treatment, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, with that, you've given me a different Stellar Wish. I had another one, but my Stellar Wish is now Hisuian Samurott Beast. And actually, like, I was really hyped on
Yeah.
that. I just like Hisuian Samurott. I think it's a cool Pokemon.
Super cool.
It was a really cool designed card. It had Dark Patch, which who doesn't want to play Dark Patch? Dark type decks like are just fun to play, I think, for
Yeah.
me personally anyway. Like, I was really hyped on that. It could be played with the Inteleon engine, and I love the Inteleon engine. And it just couldn't ultimately get there with the Hisuian Samurott. So that's going to be my Stellar Wish for this week. I'll save the one I thought of earlier for next week, but Hisuian Samurott, that's it for me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that probably wraps us up here.
Think so.
Anything else from you guys?
No, I think we about covered it this week.
All right. Sounds
Yeah.
good. Well, look forward to next week where we'll be talking about NAIC and why Baxcalibur is the coolest new deck in the format. Until then, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and comment down below with a viewer question. And if we get some good viewer questions, maybe we'll address more of them in the episode next week. But until then, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, guys.
Yeah. See ya.